The world of communism and the world of free choice have been caught up in a vicious circle of conflicting ideology and interests.
To change the perception of reality of every American, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions.
What we do here may be important, but what we leave behind is even more important.
When you think of Los Alamos Laboratory, there's two things you can think of: the nuke and Soviet atomic spies. The Manhattan Project, which lasted from August 1942 all the way to August 1945, produced the 25 kill streak, or the random zombies drop, the nuke. Or the atom bomb, whichever one you want to call it. There were lots of cool people connected to the Manhattan Project, such as the op himself, Alzheimer, Niels Bohr, and a shit ton of other people that I don't know. But there's one person who sticks out to me, and his name was Perseus. And I know what you're thinking. Isn't that the Black Ops Cold War villain? Yeah, might be. But he could have been real.
I spoke into his eyes, I thought you died alone.
Perseus was the potential codename given to a Soviet atomic spy who could have infiltrated Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project. His other codenames included Dr. X, Fogel, Pers, and Emlad. This Perseus could have been instrumental to the Soviets' attempts in making nuclear weapons. However, no one knows who Perseus could have been, but there's some ideas. There exists a profile of a young American scientist at the time of the Manhattan Project that fits the believed identity of Perseus. Who this person could be isn't known, obviously. No name or image is available. This man's identity starts all the way back with Vladimir Chikov, a former KGB officer. Chikov claimed that Perseus worked with both Enrico Fermi in Chicago and with Robert Oppenheimer at Los Alamos. However, if real, Perseus is believed to have been of age to have participated in the Spanish Civil War, which did have some Soviet assistance. Not much, but some. It was mainly material assistance. During the 1940s, Perseus would have been in New York City visiting his sick parents, and while in the city, he must have been recruited by the GRU. This could have happened after contacting a man named Morris Cohen, an American who joined the Communist Party during the Great Depression and worked as a Soviet spy. Honestly, that's kinda cringe. I'm in the Great Depression myself, and yet I'm not a communist. This meeting between the two could have been sometime between September 1941 and July 1942, before Cohen enlisted in the army. Perseus should have been working at Los Alamos during 1942 and would have been recruited by the Soviets around the same time as another famous atomic spy, Klaus Fuchs. A Russian magazine named The New Times states that Perseus would have aligned with the Soviets only for ideological reasons, believing that the US would use the atomic bomb on the Soviet Union, and also stating that Perseus declined any sort of payment for classified info. Their quote is, "The Pentagon is of the opinion that it will take the Soviet Union decades to harness atomic energy. In the meantime, America would destroy socialism by means of the uranium bomb." A very specific piece of info that Perseus may have given over were crucial details on the Trinity test, which was the first detonation of a fucking nuke. This comes from Lona Cohen, Morris's wife, who acted as a receiver of info which was supposedly given from Perseus himself, in which she would take this info directly to the Soviet Council, Anatoly Yatskov, in New York City. Yatskov, a veteran KGB officer, had also endorsed the story of Perseus after Chikov's claims, and it's worth noting that Yatskov had supervised several spies in the Manhattan Project. Now, I'm gonna go over this info one more time in case it was a little confusing, right? Unknown Soviet spy named Perseus fought in the Spanish Civil War, was recruited to Los Alamos as a scientist, visited his parents in New York City in the 1940s, met with Morris Cohen and was recruited to the KGB during his New York City visit, worked with both Fermi and Oppenheimer, passed along classified atomic info to the Soviets. There we go. The last thing we may know about Perseus is that during the 1950s, he may have been under the control of Rudolf Abel, whose real name is William Fisher. The other thing is that Rudolf Abel is actually a big deal for this story, and that's because he was tied to many spies who were suspected of actually being Perseus, right? This is the wide-known story of Perseus, and by wide-known, I mean the official narrative. But since we're on the internet, we're not supposed to follow the official narrative. Do I look like I lack critical thinking skills? I do.
Oh no, not me. I never lost control.
So, the story of Perseus gets really convoluted. Lots of different tellings of Perseus have become established, and I introduced it to you that way so we can clear things up as we go along. That, and because I need to inflate the video. Former KGB Colonel Vladimir Chikov was the first to mention Perseus in an article published for The New Times. He stated that there was an atomic spy that was still alive in 1991 and was unknown to the American security, named Perseus. He initially described him as a Native American who joined the Manhattan Project to develop nuclear weapons. He was recruited by the Soviets to deliver them classified information, and in 1946 he ended his cooperation with them. Anatoly Yatskov, as we know, had later confirmed the existence of Chikov's claimed agent, and in 1994 the Foreign Intelligence Service issued a statement which confirmed the existence of Perseus. In October 1994, Morris Cohen had also confirmed the existence of Perseus in an interview. Chikov claimed that Cohen and Perseus knew each other and they both spoke in support of the Spanish Republic. However, Cohen does state that there is no evidence that Perseus fought in the Spanish Civil War, or he was even in Spain, for that matter. Chikov's sources claim Perseus worked at the metallurgical lab at the University of Chicago with Fermi and at Los Alamos with Oppenheimer. Metallurgical is such a fucking hard word. Who the fuck made that? I hate that word. Perseus would pass information over to Lorna Cohen during 1944 and 1946. In 1995, the Venona files were published. These were partial declassification of Soviet secret messages. They had been uncovered within the US under a counterintelligence program known as the Venona Project. Within these files, there is an unidentified agent under the codename Pers. Many people believe that this could have been Perseus himself, and that leaves us with the big questions. Chat, when will she text me first? And just who is Perseus? Klaus Fuchs is probably the most well-known atomic spy from the Manhattan Project. KGB head Hold on, let me read this name real quick. Pavel Sudaplatov. There you go. He wrote in his book that Fuchs was codenamed Emlad, Star, and Charles, I guess. However, we can actually count out Fuchs because eventually we found out who Emlad and Star were actually referring to. Theodore Hall is the Tobey Maguire looking dude, and just like Fuchs, because he was one of the big atomic spies, he could have been tied and even suspected of being Perseus. Hall has one matching qualifier to the Perseus profile. He did have parents in New York City and did visit them during this believed time frame of Perseus recruitment. However, Hall was eventually revealed to have been codenamed Emlad, and his former roommate, now fellow spy, courier, Saville Sachs, was revealed to be Star. This counts both Hall and Sachs out as Perseus, as well as counting out the codename Emlad. Author Jeremy J. Stone wrote in his book titled Every Man Should Try an accusation that states Philip Morrison was Perseus. Morrison was one of the US's most beloved physicists, having graduated from MIT, and in an even more wild turn of events, was a friend of Stone. It's really safe to say that they're not hitters anymore. Stone went as far as to publicly say that Morrison was Dr. X in an interview with the New York Times. Stone used Perseus' motivation in avoiding monetary payment and willingly giving over classified info for ideological reasons as a means to, find a starting point. Stone claimed that any physicist who wanted to avoid any sort of nuclear holocaust would have been an original member of the Federation of American Scientists, not someone who would become a spy. Stone's claims have few issues, however, mainly that they're not convincing. Stone had figured out that Morrison was Perseus and had tried to get him to say it, interviewing him multiple times and asking him about Perseus, in which Stone claims that due to Morrison's body language becoming nervous, this meant that he was hiding something. On May 10th, 1999, Morrison was able to prove he wasn't Perseus by clarifying a few things. He did not serve in the Spanish Civil War. He was a grad student at UC Berkeley at the time. His parents did not live in New York City, but rather they lived in Pittsburgh. And in the end, Stone couldn't prove it, and he apologized to Morrison, saying to him, and I quote, "I welcome the information you provided in your letter of May 10, 1999 concerning the ways in which you differ from the profile given by the KGB of the spy Perseus, and in light of these facts, which I certainly cannot contradict, I can only accept your denial that you are Perseus." Russell A. McNutt. Now, there are two inappropriate jokes you can make with this guy's last name that drastically differ with tone, so I'm not going to make either of those jokes because they are predictable. Russell Alton McNutt was a civil engineer who worked for the Calyx Corporation and was a friend of Julius Rosenberg. Calyx being a main contractor for the Manhattan Project's Oak Ridge, Tennessee facility, due to this friendship with Rosenberg, he was suspected of being a spy as well. McNutt was also codenamed Persian. Alexander Vasiliev wrote in his book Spies, The Rise and Fall of the KGB in America that within the Venona files there is a mention of an unknown spy named Pers. This mention kicked off the search for Perseus. However, Vasiliev states that Pers was shortened from Persian, not Perseus, meaning that Pers, codenamed, actually belonged to McNutt. McNutt, however, was never convicted, and soon after the arrest of the Rosenbergs, he lost contact with the KGB. This leads everyone to the question of, was Perseus even real?
I laughed and shook his hand and made my way back home.
Sudoplatov was dismissive of the idea of Perseus. His explanation was that although Yatskov had mentioned Perseus in an interview in 1992, Sudoplatov had never remembered anyone with that name. His suggestion is that Perseus, the name, was a codename to hide the actual names of their sources. These statements were made in 1994. Then there's the Venona inconsistency. The Venona files that mention Pers state that this man worked at Oak Ridge, which was named Camp 1. Jeremy Stone claims that Pers must be Perseus. However, if Pers was working at Oak Ridge, he could not have been working at Los Alamos, thus not making him the fourth spy there. Also discrediting his accusation of Philip Morrison, who worked at Los Alamos. In 2019, Oscar Sabor was revealed to have been the fourth spy at Los Alamos. However, he used the codename Godsend. Sabor was sent to Los Alamos in December 1944 to work on explosive equipment for the nuclear weapon. Given this, Sabor must have had completely different knowledge than Fuchs and Hall, given the fact that he worked on the actual detonation itself. While it's not known exactly what Sabor gave over to the Soviet Union, it's pretty safe to guess that it had something dealing with explosives, detonations. However, John Hayes, who co-wrote Vasiliev's book, along with Harvey Clare, both state that Sabor should not be identified with Perseus, given that he doesn't match anything of the Perseus profile. Joseph Albright and Marcia Kunstel published their book titled Bombshell, in which they conclude that Perseus never existed in the first place, dubbing their dedicated 12th chapter as The Perseus Myth. This claim starts by saying that two KGB officers, Vladimir Chikov and Igor Prelin, were given access to secret files in order to find something to rehabilitate. Jesus fucking Christ. They were given secret files in order to find something to rehabilitate the agency's status, right? To make it look better. Soviets had many counters to Western agency tactics, but they had yet to have a published story on how they stole plans from the Manhattan Project. Their goal? To create a story that makes them look better than they actually were. Chikov had worked with another officer named Yuri Drozdov, head of the illegal section of the Foreign Intelligence, to find a story that could find any unknown Soviet atomic spies of the World War II era. Chikov had admitted that Drozdov had changed around some dates, names, and locations. Chikov and Prelin could have even gotten info firsthand from the Cohens, especially since in 1991 the Cohens resided in Moscow. The book describes how Chikov had used the name Perseus for the first time, taking it from a fellow soldier of Morris from the Spanish Civil War. Also, it described how Lona Cohen received and passed along atomic secrets. And I can mention it now, but Chikov originally claimed that Lona received info from Perseus, but it was actually received from Hall. Lastly, in 1996, Chikov had admitted he worked with Drozdov, Prelin, and Yatskov to create the story of Perseus using the stories of Theodore Hall and an unidentified spy named Pers. These four had gotten together to fake a story of how Perseus was recruited. Chekhov's quote, "The main goal was to make the story unclear, so when the intelligence of other countries began to analyze this, it would not reveal the forms and methods of the work of the Soviet intelligence." That had been told to Albright and Kunstel. However, I'm left with just one question that wasn't answered at all during my research. The name PERS wasn't known until the Venona Project files were made public in 1995, and Chekhov's claims were in 1991. It makes you think if he kind of fucked with them or not. So I guess that's the story of Perseus. I don't know if this guy was real or not. I'll be dead ass. I don't fucking know. That last question I have is genuine. That wasn't answered for me. Also, can you tell it's been a while since I've just spoken towards, the camera and with the mic, and can you tell I'm about to bug the fuck out? I don't know, chat. Maybe she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I don't know. Anyways, before I even think about it and cry myself to sleep, I'm gonna just say bye.